Good morning, boys and girls. We are on to chapter 52 in the front desk. Anyway, where we left off last, Mia had some words with the security guard from the other motel because who got fired because he was angry with Mia because Mia had something to do with it because the guy was not a very nice dude. Anyway, we're on to chapter 52. There's a saying in Chinese that goes, never forget how much rice you eat. It's a reminder to stay humble, to stay real. Just because you have an important job doesn't mean you're better than everybody else. You still eat rice like the rest of us. Well, the security guard, he definitely forgot. He let the power of his position go straight to his head, and he used it to do horrible things. I wonder if that's what happened to Uncle Zhang's boss, too, when he took away everybody's passports. At the thought of Uncle Zhang, I felt the stirring of hope. Did he give the letter to his boss yet? Uncle Zhang called us from a payphone 2 days later. You'll never believe it, he said into the phone. The letter worked. I'm free. He told us that he showed his employer my letter. The guy freaked out. He couldn't believe that Uncle Zhang had found an attorney, or at least someone who was able to write good enough English to help him out. He got really scared and immediately gave Uncle Zhang back his papers. Not only that, he gave all the other workers back their papers too. It was the most incredible feeling ever, knowing that something I wrote actually changed somebody's life. As my mom and dad and I cheered, and congratulated Uncle Zhang, my eyes slid to the closet where the printout of the essay contest lay. Maybe, just maybe, I could change our lives too. Still in the cards. Okay, kids, get out your pencils, Mrs. Douglas said in class. We're writing a story again. This time I want you to write about a small moment in your life. Sounds like Miss Andrews, if you ask me. They stole Miss Andrews' idea. A small moment? You mean like a moment that didn't really mean anything? Someone asked. Quite the contrary. A moment that meant everything, Mrs. Douglas said. Think of a time when you were ecstatic or terrified and really zoom in so we know exactly what it felt like. I stared down at the piece of white paper in front of me. My head was like a train station. So many stories buzzed in and out. I thought about all the things that happened these last few months, all the miracles and heartbreaks. A chorus of voices flooded into me. Some days my body was completely inside the dumpster, and all you saw were these two little legs kicking in the air, Uncle Lee said. I kneeled before them, holding their hands as they talked about their Chinese maids and they don't how don't they all steal, Aunt Ling said. I don't know why she slapped me. All I was said to her was, "Hey, baby," said Uncle Feng. When people look at you, they see a nice, sweet Chinese girl. When they look at me, do you know what they see? A criminal, Hank said. I borrowed the money so she could die knowing her only son was okay out there. That I had made it in America, Uncle Zane cried. Even if you're American, you'll still be my sister. You'll always be my sister wherever you are. It was the last voice. So she was going through these different voices of small moments. It was this last voice, Shen's voice, that begged, let me out, let me out. I wriggled, hoping that the feeling would pass. I didn't know how much I felt about Mrs. Douglas knowing that much about me. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That snowy day in Beijing, how hard it was to step on the plane. How the first thing we did when we arrived was take a shower. I'd never seen a shower before. A private shower, not like those group ones at the bathhouses in China. In China, there was a bathhouse in every neighborhood, and everyone went. Sometimes I'd even see my teacher there. Uh, there was there was awkward, and then there was taking a shower next to your teacher. Awkward. Oh my goodness. Those days are over. Here we have showers, my dad's friend had bragged when he picked us up from the airport and took us to his apartment. And you can even open your mouth in the shower and drink the water too. It's clean here. You don't have to boil it first. That first day, I stood in the shower for almost an hour with my mouth open, drenched in bliss, gulping down the deliciousness as the water rained down upon me. Afterward, when I looked in the mirror, guilt itched my eyes. Had I just traded my cousin in for a shower? I wondered. Hmm. The words gushed out of me. I remembered what Lupe once said about drawing, how it was all in the detail. I closed my eyes and tried to recall every color, sound, and smell of that moment. I wrote in such a trance, nearly jumping in my seat when 20 minutes later, Mrs. Douglas declared there were only 2 minutes left. I looked down at my river of words, then I glanced over at Jason next to me. Panic seized me. The words were so open and exposed. My story looked like a belly button. I immediately wanted to cover it. Then I remembered something. The itching and wriggling, like a spider was crawling underneath my skin. I'd seen it somewhere before. Where had I seen it? Oh, yes, I remember. It was Uncle Zhang's face when he told me he was a modern slave. It was on Hank's face, too, when he finally opened up to me about why nobody wanted to hire him. And look what happened. Their lives changed. If I wanted my life to change, I too needed to get past that itchy, wriggly feeling. Okay, guys, Mrs. Douglas said, who's finished? I took a deep breath and raised my hand. And that leads us to chapter 53, but I'll read it. All right, here we go. That moment I handed Mrs. Douglas my story on coming to America was also the moment I decided I had to enter the essay competition. I was ready. I could do this. There was still the tricky issue of $300 entry fee. I'd been so preoccupied with finding out who stole the missing car, I hadn't been putting out my tip jar. When I went home and fished out the entry form, panic filled my lungs. The deadline was in less than a week. There was no way I could get $300 in tips in that time. Asking my parents for money was out of the question. It was the holiday season. You think the holiday season would be a busy time for motels, but surprisingly, it's not. Folks would rather stuff themselves inside a tiny closet than have to stay in a motel over the holidays. So I couldn't ask my parents. That left only one option. My eyes slid down to the bag underneath my parents' bureau. The lucky pennies. Uh-oh. I know they weren't my lucky pennies. They were our lucky pennies. I thought about the look in my dad's face whenever we found one of those rare ones, like Christmas morning. He was so proud of them. I knew if I told him, he'd never let me sell them. He was always talking about how much they'd be worth someday, how they'd appreciate in value over time. He never let me do it. He'd never let me do it. He'd kill himself scraping together $300 some other way, probably by skipping meals and not buying my mom a Christmas present. And that I couldn't let him do, not after everything they'd been through this year. So I took a bag of special pennies and headed over to Hank's. Hank looked down at the bag. Are you sure about this? Hank asked. I'm positive, I said to him. I explained to him why I needed the money. Hank nodded and agreed to go downtown first thing tomorrow before his shift. I gave him the address of a street in downtown LA where they traded rare and valuable coins and stamps. I looked it up in the library. Before I handed them over, I took one last look at the pennies. I held them to my cheek and kissed them goodbye. I'm going to miss you guys, I whispered. The very next day, Hank returned with $312. I sucked in a breath as he handed me the crisp bills. Here you are, he said when he handed me the last of the bills. Now go win a motel. I will, I said with a grin. Our luck was going to change soon. I could feel it in my bones. As the honeycomb sun dipped lower into the sky, I sat hunched over at the front desk and wrote my story. Here is her essay for the contest. Are you ready? If I owned a motel by Mia Tang. If I owned a motel, I would treat every customer like family. I would bring all guests an extra blanket or a hat, water bottle if they were cold. I would make them a cup of tea if they were having a bad day, and I would get it out of them what happened. Because sometimes terrible things happen, but there's nothing more terrible than not having anybody to tell it to. Then, after they tell me, I would try to help them. Sometimes problems seem humongous in your head, but if you tell someone, you'll be surprised what can happen. After we've solved it, we can celebrate together by playing Monopoly after dinner, or jumping into the pool together. Life's short, and it's important to celebrate the good stuff when it happens. I would also protect myself and my customers by putting in a security camera, bulletproof glass inside the front office, and a gate so cars can't get stolen. I would I would charge customers $20 per night for a room, but give them a discount if they were weekly because the weeklies have been living there for a long, long time, and that's a lot to pay every day. If I win your motel, I promise to always treat it with love, kindness, and respect. Your motel won't be a business to me; it will be home. Hank came into the front desk just as I was finishing my essay. I handed it to him. What do you think? I asked when he was done reading. It's wonderful, he said. Just wonderful. Is the grammar okay? Do you think I should add anything? I wouldn't change a thing, Hank said. His steady eyes looked straight into mine, and years of doubt melted away. So this is it then, I said. I should just mail it, huh? Hank reached down, dug out a card from his back pocket, and handed it to me. It was Lupe's comment card, the one that said, "You can't win if you don't play." I smiled. The very next day, I mailed my essay. So that leaves us to 54. I wonder how this goes. All right, boys and girls, until next time.